All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Afterword podcast. We appreciate y'all joining us this afternoon. Each week, we're taking some time to talk about. Each week, we're taking some time to talk about. I keep making mistakes. Sorry, technology is not my friend these days. So I'm like hearing myself talk. So that's not good. But we're talking about talking today. So anyway,
Perfect segue.
yes.
Yeah.
So each week, taking some time to talk about the previous week's spiritual practice as we go through this series called Formed. So today, I am joined by Jessica Green, who is our Kids Hospitality Outreach Director. Any other titles that you have? Podcast designer. Yes.
Sure.
We also have our first time on the podcast is Taylor Buckel. Yes.
Hello,
So
everyone.
great to have you. I didn't have a title for you though. So
I don't need a title.
mom extraordinaire.
Mom extraordinaire.
You've been a mom for how many months now?
5 months.
5 months. That's amazing.
5 months. It is
Yes.
amazing. It's a lot of fun.
Very cool. Well, today we are going to be talking about renewed talking. Yeah, a whole podcast about talking, specifically getting into the spiritual practice that God invites us into about silence. So we'll get to that eventually. But just wanted to start out because here's the reality. Like, we all use words a lot. Even if you're somebody that's on the quieter side, the reality is, like, we use words all the time. I basically make a living by using words. And so there's lots and lots we could talk about and say. But we'll start a little bit more lighthearted, and then we'll move into this. Because the reality is, as we look at the passage in James in a few minutes that we looked at Sunday, it's a heavy topic. So it's not necessarily easy. Taylor joins us for just this little softball of a topic. Yes. So thanks for doing that. All right. So if you wouldn't mind sharing for a moment a time, maybe where it would have been best to keep silent, but instead you're like, no, I think I'm going to go ahead and say something, and maybe it didn't go as well as you had hoped or how you pictured it in your mind. You got any stories like
you
that?
Want me to go first? Okay. So I probably shouldn't have stayed silent, but just given a polite social laugh is probably would have been the appropriate response. My dad works for a company that ramps up in busyness when hurricanes hit Florida. So in 2004, I think it was 5 hurricanes hit the state of Florida, and my dad was working an insane amount of overtime. And I was 16, and the company, in order to kind of thank my dad for all his extra time, decided to fly my family up on the company private jet, pay for our hotels, pay for all of our meals, and give us 50-yard line tickets to the Iron Bowl. That was at the University of Alabama that year. So it's Auburn.
And you're a huge Bama fan, right?
Absolutely.
No, okay.
Won't even wear crimson and gray together. So the company is based in Tuscaloosa, so that's why they have these tickets.
Okay.
First time that I had been to the Iron Bowl, I'm jazzed to go. My dad has worked for this company for a long time, so we're tailgating before the game. And my dad's, not his immediate boss, but the boss above him, he just looks at me and he's like, so Taylor, now that you've been to the University of Alabama and you've seen our great campus, you know, what if I sent you an application to the school? What would you do? Or how would you feel about that? And with no politeness at all, I just immediately said, yeah, sure, if I can burn it. These people have paid for all this stuff for us, and my dad's just in the background so proud and so mortified all at the same
There you
time.
go. Yes.
So I probably should have just said thank you or laughed, but I chose to show my fandom.
Right. Yes.
Instead.
And for those that don't know, you are a fan of
Huge Auburn fan.
Yeah. Yes. So it would make sense that you might have a little bit of
Just a little.
some feelings about
Just a
Alabama.
couple.
Yes. But as you said, yeah, maybe the chuckle would have been
Yes.
maybe more. Okay.
More
Well, thanks for sharing
appropriate.
that. Yes. There you go. All right. Jessica, you got anything?
I have lots of things that I
Okay.
could share for this. Unfortunately, this particular thing happened when I was about 16 or 17, and so Kellen and I were dating, and we used to go to Cracker Barrel on dates a lot, which is a really hopping place for teenagers to hang out. And
Nice.
I was sitting across the restaurant and noticed a woman come in, and she had on makeup, and she just really resembled the televangelist Tammy Faye Baker. And so I saw her across the restaurant and said, Kellen, look, it's Tammy Faye Baker. And we're in Cracker Barrel, which is just loud. It's a loud place. And so my voice carries across the whole restaurant. And her daughter
really
heard me.
Sorry.
Heard me. I don't need a microphone to speak. Her daughter heard me and glared at me through the rest of our dinner. It was not received very well. It was not Tammy Faye Baker, in case you're wondering.
Oh, man.
I know.
That would have made it even better.
It would have, yeah. But, so that was a time when I used my words not in a great way. To my defense, I was 16. I've grown.
You get a pass at that point, right? Yes.
Please, Lord. Yes.
All right.
How about you, Jamie?
Oh, I have, similar. I have lots of stories. I think I mention to one or two of them in the sermon on Sunday. One that I didn't share. I don't think I've used this as a sermon illustration, so I moved to Florida right before 8th grade. New to this school, and there's this girl in this class by the name of Heather, and so we start going out with whatever that means in 8th grade. If you don't know, eventually we'd get married, but there's some time between 8th grade and that. Yes. And we were in this particular history class together, and she was confused about like a grade that she had gotten, kind of how the teacher had said something, and I think she had a valid point. She actually was correct in that it shouldn't have been marked wrong. She should have been given credit. And I thought, I'll rise up and kind of speak, like I'll honor her in this moment. And it just went bad because I started arguing with the teacher on her behalf. She ends up saying a few more things, being very polite and kind. And the teacher ends up acknowledging that she's right. And I go, ooh, in your face, and had one of those moments, to which point he said, you're going, and this is the interesting thing, he's like, you're going to go see your dad. And the reason was because my dad was the middle school principal there. So it was not only going to the principal's office, but it was going to see my dad and have to explain to him that I just disrespected a teacher by saying like, ooh, in your face. Anyway, so that was not good, yes. So there's this like argumentative side of me that like comes out, and that was one of those moments. So anyway, so it was like, oh, you get a detention and you're grounded, like all in the same like meeting.
Ask, like, what's the punishment for when your dad's the principal?
Not great. Yes. Yep. So there you go. So I'm sure we could tell more stories, but we'll move on. All right. And so this past Sunday, I'm going to just read part of it. We looked at James chapter 1, the first 12 verses. I'll just read verses 5 to 12 to kind of set this up. And as I'm reading this, I'd love to just get some response, like, hey, what grabs your attention? What is like, oh, maybe it like is what's alarming or what's confusing, or just there's no wrong answers here, but just we'll talk through this text a bit and allow this to help kind of shape how we think about talking, words, speaking, all of that. So James chapter 1, it says this. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. So James is not holding anything back here, all right? Verse 7, for every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth the same opening, both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water. So James paints this picture, gives lots of descriptions about our words, the tongue, all that. So for a few moments here, what grabs your attention? What stands out in that passage? Or do you completely disagree with James's description? You're like, no way. I'm completely righteous in all that I say. Although we can't say that because we just shared stories that were terrible. Yes. So.
Yes. I'm not quick to disagree with James.
I agree. I'm not quick to disagree.
All right, we're pro-Bible.
We're pro-Bible.
Pro-Bible. Just want to put that out there.
Yes.
I think the strength of the language used is like he is not mincing words here. And I think any of us could, especially in our current climate, if you spend any time on social media or
I
even
have no idea what you're talking about. It's where I go for my morning devotion. It's so
geez.
therapeutic. Yes.
Even just in conversations with other people, there's so many opinions right now to be had. And I know my heart can be very quick to discredit others' opinions. And so I'm, not slow to listen or quick to listen and slow to anger. I'm slow to listen and quick to anger the second I hear something I don't like. But I think we can, we can see like just how strong the strength of the language here is just reflected in our current cultural moment, I would say. Yeah. And so like we can see this very clearly. The world feels like it's burning sometimes right now.
Right.
And it burns a lot faster than it used to, it feels like, because of the connection that we have. That's the image that stood out to me the most. I think about words and how fast they spread and how difficult it is to correct them. It happens at my work all the time. Someone comes in for an internship, they make a mistake. Somebody kind of speaks about that mistake when we're evaluating them and deciding whether or not they get an offer, and they end up getting an offer, and then that one mistake, because all those people heard about it on the call, suddenly that person, when they start full-time, people are hesitant to have them on their job because of one small thing.
Yeah.
And that spreads like wildfire. Well, I heard this person did this, I heard they acted this way in front of the client. And it's like, they were 21 and it was not that egregious, and let's just coach them. And then it's difficult that once you do have a good experience to claw back what has already been burned and just say like, oh, that was a one-off, let's claw it back. And so I think about that forest fire that happens with words.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that image, like we can't take it back, or then maybe in an attempt to sort of like, can we corral this thing? We start using more words, and then oh gosh, and it suddenly is like we're making matters worse. And you reference, James certainly is one that speaks of being, like, let's actually be just sort of quick to listen. What would that look like? And slow to speak, which leads slow to anger, all of that. There's so much in here that that resonates, that's convicting, and a reminder that you said, he doesn't mince any words like that. The power that is actually there. And so there's opportunity with that if there is that sort of power, and yet, gosh, there can be obviously all kinds of problems that come with those things. One of the quotes I shared on Sunday, and I'd love to dialogue about this a little bit. Paul Tripp speaks about words, and so these particular thoughts. Part of the reason I shared it on Sunday, I was like, this seems like such a really good sort of synopsis of like the power and the problem. And he says, words give life, words bring death, you choose. I thought even just the way he starts that out, right? It's just right there. And that we've experienced probably both of those things, like when it's been spoken to us, but also in things that we've spoken to other people. What does this mean? And he says, it means you have never spoken a neutral word in your life. That's just a scary thought. Your words have direction to them. If your words are moving in the life direction, they will be words of encouragement, of hope, love, peace, unity, instruction, wisdom, and correction. But if your words are moving in a death direction, they will be words of anger and malice, slander, jealousy, gossip, division, contempt, racism, violence, judgment, and condemnation. Again, your words have direction to them. When you hear the word talk, you ought to hear something that is high and holy and significant and important. May God help us never to look at talk as something that doesn't matter. And even as you were talking about like words, like the fire that it can create when we think social media, and there's a culture of outrage, and some of it is really good. There are things that we should be outraged about, and yet sometimes the direction that goes in, we have to ask ourselves, is it producing like more, is it words of anger and malice and slander and jealousy? And we can certainly see those things. And so again, there's power, but there also is there's a potential for a lot of problems. So what I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on is let's start with more of the positive, and then we can move to things that are the challenge of words. But where have maybe you've experienced somebody using their words sort of in maybe a redemptive way, a way that brings life, that filled you with courage or hope, like somebody has spoken something into your life? Have you had that experience? What has that been like? How's that been helpful? Any particular stories that come to mind?
Jess always wants me to start first.
Yes. She wants you to speak words of encouragement to her right now, actually, in real time.
Please.
I would say when I was going over these questions, I was thinking through specific instances, and there are specific instances, but I was not really thinking through a specific case. What I thought about was just Leslie Fritjofson's relationship the relationship I have with her, our friendship. So Leslie and I have been friends. Don't ask me how long. And we have gotten to the point in friendship that we have spent so much time together that she sees me differently than I see myself. And so she knows my flaws really well, and she also knows my strengths really well. And she knows exactly how to speak into situations where, even situations where I've sinned, and I can come to her and talk about when I've made mistakes, and she speaks into that really, really well, just like loving me, maybe laughing about what I said with me and being like, yeah, that wasn't a good idea. But then talking about understanding my heart and working through that with me. And I just, that's what I thought of, was just probably every conversation. She's one of the most consistent friends I've seen during the pandemic. We've been a little bit more conservative because of having a newborn, and she comes and hangs out on our back porch, and those conversations have just been really life-giving this whole time, in every conversation that I have with her for the last few years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the themes you see like over and over again in the Proverbs of like, we need that kind of friend, that kind of brother or sister.
For sure.
Yeah, and there's great opportunity in that. How about for you?
Yeah, I love that you took it in the direction of not just like encouraging words, but also challenging words that ultimately lead to life. I have a good friend that I can call anytime and ask an honest question, and she will always give me an honest answer. And I think that is so necessary, to have someone who is willing to speak the truth in love, because they love me, they care about me, they are going to tell me the honest truth. I think some of the most life-giving words to me have been from people who have known me most of my life, and have seen God move and work through the course. And so I think a lot of times I find myself, and maybe others can relate to this, where I'm like, God, I'm still dealing with the same issues that I've had for the last 15 years. Like, when are you going to fix this? Like, when are you going to take this away from me? And so when someone who has known me for a very long time, in this case, it was my mother-in-law, actually, said, I've seen you grow so much over, she saw me as the pretty loud, obnoxious 16-year-old, highly opinionated, always willing to speak my mind.
She wasn't the lady at Cracker Barrel, was she? Okay.
She was not the lady.
Okay.
No, my mother-in-law does not
look like That could have
Tammy
gotten off
Faye
to a
Baker.
bad start.
No, that was not her. But she has told me, like, areas where she has seen me grow and where she has seen God move and work in my heart, and so that, that's just so encouraging, to have someone else point out the faithfulness of God and that sanctification process. And I still struggle with so many things, but just to see, like, oh God, you've just that encouragement and the way that God has worked, is really powerful. So, yeah.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. A couple things came to mind for me in thinking about this question, and this would be a little bit of a rabbit trail. It makes me even wonder. I'd be fascinated to even know, like, in general, for painting with a broad brush here, like men in particular and their relationships, friendships with other men, like, is this even a greater struggle? Like, I'm not, and I don't mean that to say like, oh, women you guys just encourage each other all the time, must be amazing, but
But stereotypically.
But one thing recently that I appreciated, and it kind of was set up in that context of like, hey, we normally are more engaged in just sort of like friendly banter, like ripping one another, that sort of thing. But I signed up for this sonship course, and in it you had to have, if you're married, you had to have your spouse like write something, but also just find a friend. It's kind of like a review. Tell me a little bit about this person, and so I was like, all right, well, Ethan, here you go, and I sent that over to him, and it was an encouraging thing because he's like, hey, I mean, he didn't have to pass it on, he just had to send it directly, but he's like, hey, just so you know, he's like, and I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was like, for all the just joking and banter and acting like jerks to each other in that sort of funny sort of way. Here's some things I do appreciate, and it was super encouraging to have that even that idea of like encouragement is this idea of kind of speaking or breathing in courage into us so that we might be able to like move forward with whatever happens. And so that's something more recently, and then something sometimes even just random. I remember literally sitting in this coffee shop that I really like up in Boone, North Carolina. And it was quiet. It had this bookstore attached to it, and so it's silence and this person walks up, and was like, "Hey, I don't know you at all, but I felt the Lord prompting me to just give you this." I go, okay, and it was just like this little handwritten note that said something like, it wouldn't even say Heavenly Father. Like I think they said your Papa in heaven or something like some of that kind of language is pleased with you or happy with like that sort of thing from this complete stranger. And even those moments, like, oh my goodness, like to for one to have somebody that is maybe in their silence actually listening, and then to take the risk of being like, I don't know this person over here, but they're going to go do that. So that was another thing that came to mind that is from a complete stranger, but I really do believe like God's care for us and how he uses the words of others to speak his words over us. Certainly he's given us his word in the scriptures, but oftentimes too it is that opportunity that we have to speak words of life to other people. So I appreciate y'all sharing that. On the flip side, we know it's not always that, right? Not everybody is walking around encouraging each one of us. And certainly, I won't speak for you all, but I know my disposition is not to just walk around. I don't think if you ask my wife and children, like, he is just oozes encouragement, like, please stop with the encouragement. Like that's, and so the related question is like, where have you used words then in that instead of a life direction, but a death direction, or maybe to put it another way, if there is this fire, I mean, wisdom, sometimes there's a good fire and it's to throw gasoline on that, but oftentimes there's this bad fire that's burning, and we could use our words to throw water on it, but maybe instead we're like, oh, I'll grab that gas tank and I'll just add to it. I'll add fuel to that fire, and things get even more out of control. So to whatever extent you're willing to share, I mean, have you experienced that? Have you been not only things that you've received, but things that you've contributed to in that regard?
Yes.
Okay.
This is probably one of the biggest struggles for me personally. I am a verbal processor, and so I tend to talk through everything that pops in my mind. And y'all, everything that pops in my mind does not need to be said. Like, it doesn't need to be spoken. And so,
that's why we're giving you a mic right now. Just
I know I'm like trying to be very careful, no, I think even most recently in this pandemic, as we know, everyone has varying opinions and levels of comfort, and and so I've felt the need to defend my decisions, whatever decisions I'm making. I've felt the need to defend every single decision that I've made, and I think that has been very unloving to some people, and so just in my quickness to share my opinion and what I think without even caring maybe what they think or what their side is, just feeling like I have to immediately lead with that. But and I would say just in general, I'm a pretty opinionated person. Like I just tend to have I tend to have thoughts on lots of things, and I don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily, but I think the way that I'm so quick to share typically what my opinion is without running it through the filter. Like in our house, we go through the filter of is it true, is it kind, is it necessary, and so without running it through that filter at all, like is it even kind or necessary for me to share this with this person? So I would say that's my most recent. I also my husband can attest to this. He is so patient with me, but I don't like to leave anything unsaid. So if there's an argument, if I have a feeling about something, I feel like I have to tell him every single thing I think about it, and we cannot stop talking about this until we have come to this resolution, which probably means that you just say I'm right, and so, yeah, that's not, helpful at all, kind, true, or necessary. Like, it's none of those things. And so, yeah, so I've learned from him, he is really good about walking away from a conversation that feels too hard to have at that moment, when emotions feel like they're running high, like walking away and taking a break and then coming back and talking about it when we're level-headed, and I will push through until there's some kind of resolution. And so, yeah, I think those are my two biggest struggles, like in a day-to-day. And I think in none of those am I seeking to honor God. Yeah. Am I seeking to love other people? I'm really looking after myself in that. Yeah. And so
I would say for me, I think there's times for tough love and there's times not for tough love. And I love to go to tough love a lot faster than I probably should. And so I'll start out. I was telling someone the other day that I feel like I'm a reverse Sour Patch Kid. Like, I'll start out sweet, but if I feel like you're not listening to the sweet, I'll just turn sour real quick in the name of tough love. And so I really struggle to like remain patient in the sweet side of love. And sometimes tough love is necessary, right? But I think I just make that switch a lot faster, and I'm harder on people that I know can handle tough love. So maybe if I think they can handle tough love because they give it a lot, I'll maybe start with that with them when maybe I should not go that route. And I think that they're going to receive it as appreciating the bluntness and knowing my heart, but that's not what they're hearing in the moment. They're really hurting, and they're just hearing more hurting instead of hearing what my heart actually is of wanting to help them. So I would say that's what I thought about with that question a lot. Was just switching to that real quick.
Right. And I appreciate the honesty with that. And even as both of y'all were talking, I think there's things like they're really beautiful and good things about that, sort of an intentionality to like, I want to push through and seek resolution. I'm willing to speak the truth in love, to say some hard things, and yet even in that good gift that God has given, or particular personality or temperament or ability to do those things, like obviously we can twist those or use them to our own ends. And I mean, oh gosh, this question, I mean, like there are countless examples from like, for me, I mean, a grumbling, complaining spirit that just kind of zaps like the energy in the room. I mean, and this was actually less about the words that I spoke, but just overall countenance. And so it was like silence, maybe in the wrong way of sitting down to dinner. Heather had prepared this meal, and it was like, and our kids are really busy. They're stage of life and stuff. And so it was like, hey, it was kind of an opportunity to all of us to sit down. Everyone kind of adjusted their schedules to all be there. I made the mistake of I'm going to check my email right before dinner, and I got something, and it was I was like, it brought some disappointment. Some things I needed to process, but I was just like, I mean, just like the rest of dinner, and everything, like, what's wrong with that, And so I mean, so that is like, even that's selfish behavior. I wasn't necessarily saying a whole lot, but it was like, look at me and my sort of moping self. So that's like a lack of use of words, and then other times, like I can think of there's so many times where what I feel like, oh, is just sort of personality and maybe something, I don't know how often people receive things that I say as humorous, but I try sometimes. And so like in the moment and to say something and like, I think in doses that might be like, oh, isn't that nice or can be appreciated. And then for the people that live in my home that have to deal with that like nonstop, like if somebody thinks, oh, that's kind of funny in a sermon, imagine like having to live with that like all the time. And so, yeah, just numerous times I'll just beat this topic or joke to death. And then I'm like, oh, okay, there's tears. I should have stopped like a while back, And so those sort of moments happen sadly more frequently, and I'm still learning to be like, just shut up. Like, you don't need to like make another joke in this moment. And so that can be something, again, like not that humor's bad, but like, oh, yes, it's like the proverb that I referenced of like speaking loudly in the morning, just like, good morning, everyone. It's like there's a time and a place for certain types of words and humor and all of that. But if you don't read the room, it's sometimes like, it's not going well. Yes. Right. So plenty of those things. So let's conclude with this though. We've talked more about words and speaking and less about the practice. And I realize some of the other practices we've looked at, you think about like meditating on scripture or feasting, even solitude. Like silence is one that kind of can go with a lot of those things. So it could be, take a whole day to be silent. That wouldn't be a bad thing. At the same time, there's also how do we remain silent maybe just in the moment? So it's maybe less planned times, but just, and not in a passive way, but in I should probably just hang tight for a moment. And so to kind of get at that, because again, Jesus speaks to like our words reveal our heart. And so it's like, okay, we need to stop and pay attention. And Richard Foster commented on this. He said, one reason we can hardly bear to remain silent is that it makes us feel so helpless. We're so accustomed to relying upon words to manage, control others. If we are silent, who will take control? God will take control, but we will never let him take control until we trust him. He says, silence is intimately related to trust. Silence is one of the deepest disciplines of the Spirit, simply because it puts the stopper, and this is the key thing, we'll close our time with this, on all self-justification. One of the fruits of silence is the freedom to let God be our justifier. We don't need to straighten others out. And so, for a moment, I'd just love to hear your thought, like what resonates with you in that, is specifically paying attention to that line of justification. We use words in a self-justification kind of manner. Does that resonate with you? Does that relate as we think about even the things that we've been processing and talking through? So, thoughts, comments?
I laughed. I made the mistake 2 weeks ago to start praying for humility and patience, which is you should never pray for those things because they will always be answered.
That's like Christianity 101. Right. Don't pray for that.
Never the lotto. Always humility.
Right.
Plenty of that to pass around. So, I started to do that. I mean, every day, if you go back in my journal, it talks about that. And so thinking about self-justification, that immediately within the first week, there were probably 3 conversations with 3 different people where I was forced to stop talking. Either they just exited the conversation, or I knew that anything else that I said, it was very clear anything else I said was just not going to be received well, and it just needed to end and set it down for another day. And it's hard. It's really hard, not because I want to be right in these specific, there's certainly an element of that, but the bigger element for me is I want you to know that I care. And if I'm silent, then I'm afraid you'll question that I care. And if it's questioned that I care, then that just feels really disastrous to me. It feels like friendship ending. It feels like I go to bed at night wondering what they're thinking about going to bed. Are they upset with me?
Right.
So just having to learn to let those conversations go, and to so the reason why I started praying for that was because I had gotten to a point in a friendship where nothing I was saying was helpful, and I felt like everything I was saying was death. And that was really frustrating for me because that was not my desire. And so I just was like, okay, it is clear that I just need to give this up to you. And so when in the quote, when he talks about like letting God be our justification, I was like, you love this person, you care about this person, you want life for this person. And so I'm just going to be quiet now. And I'm going to I'm just going to pray for them every single day and pray that I be quiet every single day unless I need to speak. And so that's been really hard because I do care about them so much.
Right.
But yeah, it gets difficult.
Yeah. I appreciate you speaking to that and that line there about God is the one who provides our justification. And so it really is an invitation to rest here. Like silence can be like, all right, God, you got this, but it's hard to get to that spot
hard to
for
get
sure.
To that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think in all of this, at the end of James, I love the end of the James passage that we read. It says, "From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things from the same opening, both fresh and salt water." And so the hope there is that there actually is a spring of fresh water, that there actually is fruit to be produced. And so I think just that reminder that God is my justification. I don't have to prove myself to anyone. That Jesus died for me, and I don't have to justify myself. If I say anything, all I can really say is I'm worse than you think I am, and like whatever the worst you think about me, I'm worse than that. Like it's that bad, the condition of my heart apart from Christ, but Jesus is good, and he has clothed me in his righteousness. And so because of that, I'm terrible, but he's not. Jesus is really good, and because of his silence, that Isaiah verse that you used on Sunday, because of his silence, we are given life and salvation. He did not seek to justify himself, and because of that, we are justified. And so I was even just looking in preparation for this, looking through the Bible for other scriptures on talking, and King David even prayed, "Set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth, keep watch over the door of my lips." And that was in Psalm 141. And so just that, I don't know, I've found myself praying that a lot lately when I've had a lot of feelings about everything and feel like I need to say everything all at once. I don't have to. Like, Lord, set a guard over my mouth, and keep watch over the door of my lips, because I don't need to say anything. God has done it for us. So.
Yeah. I appreciate y'all. Yeah. Again, speaking to those things, I think that is a constant struggle. And so our encouragement as we wrap up here is, like, pay attention to those things. Certainly, there is that need kind of below the surface. I find myself all the time of like, am I using my words here to love and serve somebody, or is it, well, I want to be known as a person that loves and serves people, so I got to do this, or there's an argument, and rather than just letting it go, and I don't mean in a passive or in a stonewalling sort of way either, but it's okay, because when like you said, you look to the silence of Christ. I mean, if there's anybody who could have been like, all right, just sit down, let me run through like all the things that I've done, like he has the ultimate list of he's done everything actually right, which is not the case for me. So and yet he willingly like allows others to heap words of shame and of insults and goes to the cross, like all of that, and doesn't talk back, doesn't disobey, doesn't fulfills what the Lord, his Father, has called him to, is pretty incredible. And that now, the words that are spoken of Christ, like out of the baptism waters, like, behold, like, this is my beloved Son, in him I am well pleased. Like, if you're in Christ, like, that's the word. And so when I rest in that, I don't have to argue. I don't have to prove. I can actually stop pretending, performing. I can actually rest, because those words are true of me, of us now, and not just the this is my son. Well, I guess he's part of the family, but no, like this is my beloved. Like this is, yeah, there's pride and love, and it's just overflowing. Yeah, in that place, I'm like, cool. I should be silent more, like just rest in that. And so I appreciate y'all taking the time today, diving into this. Not an easy topic for sure, but one that I think is needed. And so thank you for tuning in and being part of this conversation. Leave any messages or comments if you got questions, anything we can continue the dialogue about, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Should have just